Stop. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully everyone can hear me. As I noted here, you can connect your audio through your computer or through your telephone. So if you're having any issues with hearing, you can go ahead and note that in the chat box. I'm going to review the actual panel in a minute. Everyone is muted so that there's no interruption in this webinar, but if you should have an issue and you can't type anything in the chat box, and for accessibility reasons, you can go ahead and there's a way for you to raise your hand. I'm going to show you that. And then we're going to, throughout this webinar, stop to see if anyone has any questions. So here you can see, this is what your dashboard looks like. Everyone has this. No one can see your dashboard. That's only you can see that. At the top, there's the audio. So you can change your audio from telephone or speakers through your computer. There's also an area where you can raise your hand if you have questions. And if you look at the bottom, there's something that says questions, and there's also something that says chat. So we'll periodically through this webinar put something up on the chat box if we want you to have a link, or if we want to give you any other information, we'll put it into the chat box. So again, if you have any questions or if you're having trouble, go ahead and put that in the chat box. There will be someone who will be monitoring that and can answer that for you. I'm going to go ahead now and switch the computer sharing over to someone else who will be presenting. I have a couple people with me, and once I switch this over, I'm going to give you introduce all the presenters to you. So I do believe now, Dylan, I am making you a presenter, so you can go ahead and share the PowerPoint for us.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So thanks. So this is our supported decision-making webinar, which is part of our Building Independence series. My name is Dawn Monaco, and I work for SPAN, which is the SPAN Parent Advocacy Network here in New Jersey. We are the federally funded parent center in New Jersey. And I am a senior trainer, but I am also a co-director of a project called Reach for Transition, where at the end you'll have the link to the website, our webpage, Reach for Transition webpage on our SPAN website. There's lots of great information on that site. So if you haven't already checked it out, please do so. This webinar is being recorded. We have many webinars up on our site. We record them, we caption them, and they're available on our website in both English and Spanish. So this will be recorded and be put up on our website. So the Reach for Transition grant is a regional grant, and within that we have 9 parent centers in 7 states in our region who are a part of this grant. And I'm very lucky to have Carrie Woodcock with me. She will be co-presenting. She's from the Maine Parent Federation, and she's the executive director there. We've worked together on this topic of supported decision-making before. So she will be presenting along with me. So welcome, Carrie. Happy to have you with me.
Hello, and thank you for having us present with you.
Also, we have Dylan Campbell, who is the youth coordinator across the state of Maine and who works with the Maine Parent Federation, and he's also a parent trainer in the northern part of Maine. So thank you, Dylan, and he's a young adult, and thank you, Dylan, for joining us today and for agreeing to present with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I can't wait. It'll be a good time.
Great. So as I said, this webinar is on supported decision making, and we plan on having a series. We'll talk more about that at the end, but this is part one of the series where we want to talk about how to build skills for independence. So you can go ahead and move it, Dylan, please. Okay, so think about this. What if someone told you you're not allowed to go home today, you're not allowed to go to work, you're not allowed to have friends? And this is all because someone else doesn't want you to, and they are in charge of making all your decisions. So we believe that everyone has the right to make choices to the best of their ability. Sometimes people with disabilities need a little extra help to make their own decisions. And this is where supported decision making comes in. So I'm going to read this quote. Supported decision making is an alternative to guardianship through which people use friends, family, professionals to help them to understand and the choices that they face so they may make their own decisions without the quote unquote need for guardianship. It is an emerging approach to providing decision-making assistance without imposing any long-term legal limitations on rights or personal liabilities. So in some ways, for people with disabilities, it's so that they get support in making their own choices. The person with a disability is really the ultimate decider, and trusted family, friends, and staff are chosen by that individual to serve as their supporters. So really, supported decision making is a fancy way of stating something that we do every day in our life. Think about when you are going to buy a car. You don't just automatically go and purchase the car the first time. Most of the times what we do is we reach out to some of our friends and family that have cars, maybe the type that we're interested in, and we ask them, so, how do you like that car? How much did you pay for it? How is this particular way, the car works? So you ask other people for their help so that you can make the decision and that you want, and they support you in making that decision. So if you think about it, this is something that we all do every day. So Carrie?
So I'm going to jump in and speak a little bit about the work that we've done here at Maine Parent Federation, and I'll describe this slide. But briefly, Maine Parent Federation was approached by Developmental Disability Council to do some work on supported decision making because our probate code here in the state of Maine as of September 1st was changed, and our probate code now has written into it supported decision making. So what judges now have to do prior to making a full guardianship decision, they have to ask the families what other least restrictive options they've tried, including supported decision making, and not only what those options are, but why or why not they did not work for them or did work for them. And that has to now be taken into consideration when a judge makes a guardianship ruling. So part of the work that we do is we educate families on what supported decision making is, and we like to show them this chart where we feel it's the two ends of the spectrum: guardianship, which can be the most restrictive form, and supported decision making, which is the least restrictive form. There's a lot that goes in between, but we provide this chart so that they can see the two extremes, and then we educate them on what comes in between. So we present guardianship as a protective device. It is restrictive by design, and it restricts an individual's powers, rights, and authority are transferred to a surrogate person. It should be used as a last resort, and it's the most restrictive. We present supported decision making as something that presumes capacity, acknowledges that other less restrictive and legal options that can address challenges and needs are available. It asks, what does an individual need to be supported in making decisions? And it's the least restrictive alternative.
And just like to note that Carrie was mentioning what Maine's laws are under that. Every state is different, so depending on where you live, it's important to find out what those laws are in your state.
Yeah, so this past year, Maine Parent Federation started our pilot program of supported decision making. And when we did this, we had the parents in one half of the presentation, and we had the youth in a separate room. And there was this one kid that really stood out, and his name was Garrett. So from the get-go, he was an amazing self-advocate, and I knew from the first day that he would use supported decision making successfully. And so then a few weeks later, we had the parent follow-up forum, and he attended that, and we get some nice words and wisdom from him. So we decided to bring him in to speak to our youth. So this next year in supported decision making in Maine, we're going to have him be the second cohort of families, and he'll actually come in and speak to the youth as an example. So a couple months ago, I had asked Garrett and his mother, Tanya, if they would be willing to ask a couple of questions for us. And they did, and this is what they had to say.
Yeah, and the wind is talking. Yeah, for the very first time. Well, the melody pulls you towards it, painting pictures of
First of all, my name is Garrett, obviously.
peace and rise up to the light in the sky. Watch the light lift up.
This is Garrett in his natural habitat.
Watch the heavens open.
Just explain that.
Can you hear it?
I've had a much better life, I feel like, when I've had some control. I mean, if not for me having a little control over my life, I would not be in the position I am today. I managed to get my GED because I was able to establish a bit of myself into it. People always told me what I needed to do. But they never asked me what I said I should do. When I was given a say, I excelled exponentially. I mean, if someone who knew me before I turned 18, told me that I would be where I am today, I would think they were crazy. I work at Burger King, I know. But I enjoy it. The hectic craziness is one of the best parts. To quote John Oliver, it's jobs that are boring that really suck your soul. And this job is definitely not boring. It's something productive. Like I'm actually, it feels good. I like it. Do it your way. Figure out your own system. And my point here being, you can't do everything, but try and do as much as you can at the same time. And make it to your system, do it to your capabilities. Because that's the best way you're going to do it.
Probably when Garrett was 16, people started coming to me in school, at IEP meetings, doctors, pediatricians, and started talking about transitioning to adulthood. And one of the things that people were saying to me was that I really needed to start the process of applying for guardianship. And it really wasn't even a question. What people were posing to me was that was just one of the steps as he transitions. I didn't know that there were options until somebody had mentioned it to me. If I applied for guardianship and tested, we would end up in court. And I would have to stand there in front of a judge and in front of my son and say, I don't believe he's competent. And really, I have spent the last 18 years trying to make him confident, trying to help him come into his own independence and strength. And I can't imagine anything that would set that process back.
Can you hear it falling? Yeah, people just need coming close. Stand up and fight. Into the fire of grace and be one with the great I am.
So I just love that video. I can't get enough of it because I think it's such a great example of what supported decision making is. A couple things that I wanted to note from that video is that guardianship is always discussed as the next step, as if there are no other options. So the purpose of this webinar is we want parents to realize that there are options available to them. A lot of times when we're in school, or as you know, the mom mentioned the doctor, it's automatic where they will say, okay, now you have to start looking into guardianship. And no, you absolutely don't have to start doing that. There are other options. It's not an automatic step. And also what the mom mentioned was she's worked for years stressing least restrictive environment, helping her son to build independence. And then they were expecting her to go in front of a judge and say that her son was not competent. So think about that. Carrie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do when I do my workshop with the parents is, it's sort of one of those things where it's an adjustment in our brains as a parent. I'm a parent of two children with disabilities, and neither one of them are, well, one is approaching transition age, and my 12-year-old with Down syndrome is not quite there. But one of the things that I do as a mom and when I tell parents is we work really, really hard to identify their least restrictive environment within school systems. We fight for that as parents. And then as they're approaching the age of majority, when we're looking to make arrangements for them, we're choosing the most restrictive option for them in guardianship because it's a safety net for us, right? And it's that protective mode of being a parent. And if you're going to truly practice supported decision making, you sort of have to make that switch in your brain from being a parent and access those skills that you were using when you were fighting in the school district to get your child's least restrictive environment and fighting for accommodations and modifications, and think about how that can translate to your fight for their independence as they approach the age of majority while still keeping them safe. And that's why it's really important for us to highlight guardianship, supported decision making, and then all the tools that come in between in order to create a plan that's individualized for your family and have discussions with the youth about what they feel their abilities are. One of the other activities we do is we have a sheet that identifies different areas where an individual with a disability would have to make decisions, such as medical and financial and social. And it breaks it down into very, very specific areas for them. And then there's areas where they identify for that specific area. Do they feel like they can make that decision on their own? Do they feel like they need help making that decision? Or do they feel like they want somebody else to make that decision for them? And we have them fill out that sheet with Dylan in the youth portion of the workshop without their parents around. And then I've adapted it for a little bit for the parents to fill out. So they're filling out the same type of worksheet, but from the parent perspective. And what this does is it initiates a conversation that can happen in the households when they look at how the individual filled out the spreadsheet versus how the parent filled out the spreadsheet. And we encourage families to keep open minds, but go home and share how each of you filled it out and start the conversation about those areas that may be more difficult for a parent to release control, that the individual feels like they should have control of, and what tools can you put in place to make it happen so that you're creating the least restrictive environment within your own home.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So a young person has come up to you and they have asked you to be a supporter for them. So what exactly does this mean? Well, it's a nice sound. Well, you have a choice about whether or not you want to be a supporter. And if you choose to be a supporter, you should talk with the person with a disability to learn about what kind of support they want, because everybody's different and they may need support in different areas. And you should ask the person with a disability who else is supporting them, and try to meet with the other supporters. It's important to remember that you were asked to do this because a person with a disability trusts you and they want your help. So if you don't have the time to do so, you should say no. It's also important that a person may want help in some ways and not others, and there are many kinds of support.
So help support, what do I do as a supporter? I'm sorry. You're going to help support and advise the person with a disability, but you are not going to make choices for them or convince them to change their minds, even if you think the person isn't making the correct choice. People learn by making bad choices. They're safer and more protected if they can make their own choices. It's important to respect this. And if you think you want to substitute your judgment, you should not be a supporter then. Really, this is really goes around the topic of the dignity of risk. Everyone has the right to make decisions, and if they're not the right decision, to learn from them. But of course, we're going to do that with the person with the disability. We're going to support them, and we're going to make sure they have the skills to make those decisions. It's hard for parents, and I'm a parent of a son who's 20, and it's really hard to make that jump from being their parent to being their support person. We're programmed to protect them and to take care of them, and personally, I've really had to work hard at that. So if I ask my son and I ask him what he wants to do, and he tells me what he wants to do, there are times when I may not think that's the right thing. So what I might do is give him a little bit more information, but ultimately he makes the decision. And that's a tough transition to make for a parent.
We, at one of our conferences where we presented, it was the Family Voices annual conference, and Maine Parent Federation had the privilege of presenting at the conference. And one of the activities we did was we split up the members of the group into smaller groups. And there were groups of 3 or 4, and we gave them each a role that they would play on a supported decision-making team. And one of them was the actual individual with a disability, and then one of them could be the medical, providing the medical information, another one the financial information, and one of them is a parent. And then, the last one would be a person who the choice that the individual had made, it violated their belief system. And so the individual was coming to the group saying, I'm getting a tattoo, not I want a tattoo. The decision had already been made, I'm getting a tattoo. And so the group was to discuss with that individual the concerns around getting a tattoo, what that might mean for them. Had they considered financial commitment? Had they considered that it can be a medical procedure? There are needles involved. Had they considered if they have a job, what that might mean for their job? And then they report back out. And in reporting out, one of the groups had said to us, well, when we were convincing the individual, and I stopped them right there and I said, but that's not your job as a supported decision-making team. The important part of this activity is to remember the choice had already been made. So your job isn't to convince them of a different choice. Your job is to supply them with the resources and information that are available so that they can be sure that the choice that they're making is the right one for them. So you can go to the next slide, Dylan. A lot of questions we get is, what are the legal responsibilities of being a supporter? And it's important to remember that the choice that the individual is making is their choice. So you are not making the choice. You are not legally responsible for the final decision the individual has made. You are helping this person make his or her own choices. So a supported decision-making arrangement or agreement, there are agreements that are out there. It's not a legal document. The agreements are used to be sure that the supporter and the individual know how they want to be communicated with, what area of support you're providing, how often they want to be meet maybe as a group, in what way they want to be communicated with. So it's just it's a contract between you and the individual. There is nothing that's legally binding behind the supported decision-making agreement, and you are not legally bound to the decisions that that individual makes.
So do I have to be a supporter forever? No. You can stop at any time. However, you should only agree to be a support person if you expect to be able to support this person for at least a year, because it does take a while to get into the swing of supported decision making, to understand the person that you're supporting, get to know them. You want to have enough time to learn about the person and really try it out. So we want to look at it, though, as a team approach so that all responsibilities don't fall on one person. And if someone has to leave the team, then another individual can step in and take that person's role. And again, we all use supported decision making within our own lives. So it's really not a difficult thing. It's really something that you've been doing for a long time.
So here are some common areas of support. To bring it back to when Carrie was talking about the activity we did with the youth, we listed common areas of support, and for each one of those, we listed I can do this myself, I can do it with support, or I want somebody else to do it with me. And before we brought it back to the parents, we had talked about it before, and they had asked why you chose those supporters. And it was really surprising when the youth would mention things like, well, my uncle knows how to teach me about finances because he works at a bank, and social relationships, I can talk with my friends and my peers. It was really impressive that the youth did know where they needed support, and often they would reach out for support for their parents and stuff when they did need it, as we saw when we brought them back together. So decision making is a learned skill, and if we allow children to choose what they wear and eat or what they want to do for fun, we're encouraging their independence, their self-confidence, and their ability to make decisions. You really need to start young, and say a kiddo might not always match with their clothes, but maybe you can pick out choices for them, and just giving them that choice allows them to build that ability to make good decisions. It's the little things that count.
Successful transition from childhood to adulthood starts by everybody learning about themselves, their strengths and weaknesses, and using this knowledge to value themselves. And this really comes children. So let me just say that I think that this starts by talking to your child or with your child about their disability at a young age. I do believe that there are times when parents, and I'm a parent, we try to shield our children. And so by doing that, we don't talk to them about their disability. It's really important to have conversations with your child. And, you know, we don't have to use words like specific disabilities, but what we want to do is talk to them about what their strengths and weaknesses are and understand how they learn. And by doing that, they can then build self-determination skills. Children with intellectual and developmental disabilities must be taught the attitudes and abilities leading to self-determination and their teachers and families. So, and I want to also mention that we do have a webinar that we did through Reach for Transition a while back on talking with your child about their disability. And so that is also up on our web page, which we will give you, and it's been recorded, and you can go ahead and listen to that if you'd like to get more information around that. Also, we use several different documents in putting together these 10 skills to independence. We used a document which we have put up in the handouts section in your dashboard there. The Washington, D.C. curriculum that we received, this is a great document. It really does tell you how to build independent skills in your young adults, in your children and young adults. But you can start as early as kindergarten in building these independent steps. So and then there's also a document up that it's called 10 Steps to Independence, and that's there also. So we use that and a couple different things to bring you these skills to independence that families can use to teach their son or daughter to be self-determined. And all these skills are examples of practicing supported decision-making. So in exploration, we want to allow our child to explore independence within controlled situations. The power to make decisions is a great way to practice this. Experiment with the type of decisions and whether they are entirely able to make the decision on their own, or if you need to provide them with safe options. As your child progresses, these decisions can become more involved with less support provided. This skill is something that can be practiced over a course of their lifetime. In the early years, decisions like meals and clothing. As they get older, you're adding school accommodations and goals and social interactions. So just by putting out, and I always say, one of the choices is not going to be ice cream for breakfast, but you want to give them several choices of which you're happy with any choice they choose, but let them feel that they're in control and that they're making decisions in their lives. And the more we practice, the more advanced and complex exploration will be. And of course, as they grow to adulthood, you provide support and respect. So also, involving your child in family discussions, family decisions, and encouraging questions and opinions provides the opportunity to learn self-expression. The way we express ourselves can absolutely have influence on others, and it's a form of risk-taking and exploration, and it's a skill that needs to be taught. This skill is most likely to be developed in the pre-K through second grade years. Children explore and identify their learning and social preferences, and they explore the emotions attached to these preferences and the appropriate way to communicate these preferences.
Your child's sense of self-worth and confidence are important factors in developing self-determination. It all begins at the parents. Children model after what they see and how you experience your self-worth. And you can model good self-esteem by involving in family decisions, big or small. And you need to acknowledge your child's importance of self-esteem. And while parents work on their own self-esteem, children will develop their own self-worth. So always assume the ability from your child and emphasize these abilities. It goes to the simple phrase of catching your child being good. You don't want to focus on what they can't do. You want to focus on what they can do. And this skill is multifaceted as your child learns more about their disability and how it impacts their ability. It can start as early as second grade and carry on through seventh grade. You should acknowledge your child's disability and ask questions. Emphasize their individual and unique needs, as this will naturally encourage them to use skills to overcome their challenges that their disability presents. During this time, they are learning about team building skills, where they fit in, their limitations, and how to identify new skills to overcome those limitations. But it's not just about the goal, it's about the process. It's important not to celebrate just the completion of a goal, but the whole of the process along the way. This is a skill which can be started in the pre-K years and continue to be worked on aging throughout school. This really acknowledges the work of reaching a goal and you should involve your child in outlining the steps to a goal. So you can do this in the early years by working on simple goals with 1 to 2 steps, and then maybe moving on to more complex goals that take longer to accomplish, and maybe they involve more steps. And goals should be set at a level which challenges the ability while remaining attainable. Whether at home, school, or the community, we need to set the bar high, and if they're not able to achieve it, we adjust and modify. That way we lose nothing. Setting challenging and attainable goals can be done at home throughout a lifetime. So when you set the bar low, you stay low. It diminishes the sense of opportunity for the child. In the elementary years, you can advocate for school and community supports to include these goals. In the transition years, we teach self-advocacy so that youth can eventually make their own goals. And then in the adulthood, we provide support to reach those goals.
So interactions, whether they be social, educational, emotional, and employment situation, encouraging this youth with a disability to have interactions with peers both with and without disabilities teaches everybody. This can be achieved by advocating for full inclusion, seeking recreational activities through the community, school, or church programs, and scheduling one-on-one peer time. This is a case of practice makes perfect. This skill is taught across a lifetime. Daycare and pre-K years, we're teaching about how to cross-play within a group. As they enter the elementary years, we're teaching inclusion and accommodation to acknowledge differences and encourage full participation. During the transition years and even into adulthood, we're learning how to advocate for our needs within different settings so we're able to productively interact. In addition, I'd add that when we're interactions with both typically developing peers and peers who may have their own disabilities, you're providing the opportunity for the youth with the disability to not only be mentored by typically developing peers, but also to be the mentee to peers that may not be typically developing. And that sense of self-esteem will grow incredibly by having these type of interactions, which eventually leads to the youth being able to have high self-determination skills. Responsibility allows your child to take responsibility and experience the natural consequences for their decisions, both good and bad. This increases ownership of their decision and allows them the ability to make changes for future decisions. It expands the individual's exploration skills, where we encourage exploring, making their own choices, now allowing them to take responsibility for those choices. Like exploration, this skill can start simple in the early years with less complex decision-making choices, and as they get older, include them in more complex decisions. A great example is allowing them the ability to create, review, and change goals on their school and community plans. So the responsibility of participating in your own individual education programs and meetings and exploring what their responsibility is for those plans to be successful and having a voice is a great way to start increasing that self-advocacy and giving them responsibility and showing them the consequences for that decision, again, increases that self-determination. The power of choice. Choice creates opportunities for your child to be included in making choices for themselves, but also for family activities. It is important to remember that whatever the choice is, it's always honored. Having a say empowers them, increases their self-esteem and self-determination abilities. Not having a choice or voice makes us feel powerless. So as an individual included in a mainstream classroom environment, giving them the ability to be like one of their peers and within a good universal design system of teaching, that individual will blend in with the rest of their peers and be included in all of the choices. And that ability to have that like one of their peers is very empowering and just increases the self-esteem to levels that we may not see develop within a resource room classroom or a self-contained classroom. It can be practiced throughout a lifetime. It starts in pre-K years with easy choices, and as you enter the elementary years, the level of choices will increase in difficulty. During the transition years, the goals would be for the child to be taking the lead on choice when providing support and creating their own transition plans, which plays a huge role in what their adult independent life will look like. Constructive feedback. Feedback should always remain honest and positive. If the outcome was not successful, make sure your child understands that the failure does not represent them, but the task itself. Help them to understand why the task wasn't successful and what they may do differently in the future. We provide feedback to our children throughout their lifetimes. The stage of life your child is in shapes what the feedback looks like and when it is given. So it goes back to the theory of catch them doing things good. And when things fail, not always pointing the finger at the individual, but at the circumstances around the task, which choices were made that caused the failure, and how the choices could have been made differently to have more success, so that when future choices are presented to them, they're reflecting on that constructive feedback that you're giving them and perhaps making a different choice.
So I wanted to give an example, Carrie, of the failure. I wanted to give this example earlier, but I forgot. But it kind of goes to what you're saying here. So this summer, my son is 20, and we have a family vacation home by the beach. And I found my son, as he was getting older, I could tell that he was really looking for independence. He wanted to be independent. So, and this is not something we've talked about. It's not something that happens overnight. You have to provide support and steps to help ultimately get to that point. So when we were on the beach, there would be times where he would need to go back to the house for something, whether it's to go to the bathroom, to get a snack, whatever it may be. And he wanted to do this by himself. He did not want us going with him. So in the beginning, we sort of provided accommodations where if someone was back at the house, I would call them on my cell phone and say, look out the window. He's walking back to the house. And of course, prior to that, we did a lot of work around how to cross the street. And so that was already done. And then when he was getting ready to leave the house to come back to the beach, my family member would call me and say he's on his way back. So I'd know to look for him to come back. And then as we moved forward, we allowed him to do that without that accommodation. He became comfortable. So this summer, he left to go back to the house. And when he came back to the beach, he came immediately up to me, and I knew that something was off. And he said, he showed me his hand, and he said, the bicycle hit me. And I said, what do you mean the bicycle hit you? And he said, the bicycle hit me and they fell. So I said, did someone hit you with the bike? And he said, yes, and the bicycle fell. So I knew that he, I guess, walked into the bicycle. And so immediately one of my family members said, you cannot let him do that anymore. Look at, he got hurt. Don't allow him to walk by himself anymore. And so my response was, no. So now we're going to talk to him. You need to make sure you look for the bicycles. And it turns out, ultimately, a neighbor saw it happen, and it wasn't his fault. The person on the bike wasn't paying attention, and they ran into him with the bike. And they weren't going fast, but the person on the bike did fall. But so this was an example of dignity of risk. So I explained to him that, you have to look for bicycles, not just cars. So next time, make sure you wait. If you see any bicycles, you wait till they pass. You wait till the cars pass, and then you can go. And we practice it. So I think that's an example of showing that, number one, dignity of risk. And number two, building up that support and allowing him to do that, and then giving him additional support if something should happen.
And I think also that's a great example of the accommodations and modifications you put in place as a parent without necessarily making him feel embarrassed. You were giving him the independence, and you had the accommodations and modifications of his cell phone available, having neighbors keeping an eye out and letting you know. And that, as a parent, allowed you, I think, to come to the decision to let it happen. And then even when something went wrong, quote unquote, it allowed you the ability as a parent to say, no, I'm not going to take it away from him. We're just going to correct it because we know it's worked in the past, and we can find a way for it to continue to work with just a little bit of coaching.
Right. So
if we take our lead from the individuals themselves as well, I think, one of the stories I have as a mom is we went to a birthday party and we went to this big trampoline park, and she was there with all of her classmates, and they were all running off to go jump on all the equipment together. And I was going to follow her out, just naturally follow her out the door so I could keep an eye on her. And she turned around and she said to me, no, Mom, you stay here with all the other moms in the room. And it was my moment of pause to listen to her, because she was telling me I can do this. And none of the other moms are leaving. And I want to be like all the other kids. And so I needed to let it happen. And as a parent of a child with a disability, it was my moment of cut the cord, Mom, and listen to your daughter. And it's just small things like that. And I knew her classmates had her back because they had been with her the entire time. And each one of them would come back and report back to me as to what she was doing during the course of the time they were playing. And it's allowing the risk to happen while still keeping them safe and having the plan in place in case something does go wrong, but really weighing out what possibly could go wrong in this situation and making sure that they're still safe, but allowing them that independence, taking the cues from them when they say they can do something, allowing them the opportunity to do it, as long as it's not a high risk situation. You need to do it.
Right, and giving them the skills, because we want to set them up for success. Obviously, without the right skills, we're only setting them up for failure.
Right.
So why don't we open it up for questions? Does anybody have any questions for us on this? So the purpose of, obviously, we want to introduce the topic of supported decision making as an alternative to guardianship. Certainly, it's a personal family decision that needs to be made, but we want parents to know that there are options, and that we wanted to provide you with the steps to help build independence and the ability to make decisions. What we're going to do in part 2 of this series is we're going to talk about how to incorporate supported decision making into the transition IEP for, and that could be goals and objectives to help build supported decision making.
And then we're looking at a part 3 of the series where we will explore using supported decision making in a medical platform. In Maine, our guardianship rate for individuals with intellectual disabilities and autism spectrum is about double the national average. And when listening to parents, we heard that the 2 areas where they get recommendations for getting full guardianship are within the school district and within medical offices. And they're being told that if you don't get full guardianship, then you won't be able to attend meetings or make any decisions. And that's simply not true, because there are options that are available that allow you to still be included. And so there needs to be education with those providers and school districts, and it needs to come from parents as to what those options are. And that's really what you should be thinking about when you're writing transition plans for kids who are transition age, or when the doctor is looking at transitioning you to an adult provider, having those conversations with the adult provider as to what the individual skills are and their abilities and the arrangements that are in place, and that full guardianship isn't the be all and the end all.
So, and I just want to also to note that myself, Carrie, and Dylan all attended a supported decision-making symposium in the spring in Washington. And it was wonderful to see what all the states are doing around this. And while some of the states aren't changing their actual laws, they are recognizing supported decision-making as an alternative. And even if their laws aren't changed, they want to see whether supported decision-making is being built into plans. So it really is something that is starting to grow. And really what we want to do is everyone has rights and everyone has civil rights. And with guardianship, it's absolutely, as I said before, a personal, individualized decision. But we want to preserve their rights as much as possible. So I don't see any questions. I'm sorry.
Oftentimes in our parent training, we'll advise parents that even if you have full guardianship of your child, you can still practice supported decision making. You can still give them that independence to make their own decisions and support them in those decisions. And if as a parent you're having a really hard time coming to grips with not having that as a safety net, that's okay. You can still practice it even if you have a full guardianship arrangement. It's really about allowing that individual as much independence as you feel and they feel they're capable of handling.
Right. So this has been recorded. It will be up on the REACH webpage. I actually did give you that link to the page in the chat box to our REACH webpage. There's also a link that was put in the chat box for the evaluation, because we really do want to hear what you have to say about this. And that also in that evaluation is an area where you can suggest future webinars, because we're always looking for topics for webinars. I think on this one page, we have our website for the SPAN Parent Advocacy Network, also the Maine Parent Federation website. There's also the link to the ACLU website, which has some great information on supported decision-making. And there's also the decisionmaking.org website. So you'll find lots of information there. I'll put my email here also in the chat box. If you should have any questions after this webinar, I would be more than happy to answer any of them for you, or to maybe lead you in the right direction if you need any information. And so if there's no questions, then we're going to go ahead and end this webinar. We hope you found it useful and informative. And we will be together again, the three of us, for part 2 and 3. So please keep your eyes open for that. We hope you join us for that. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Carrie and Dylan.
Thank you.